Something that is not worth the hype though is also an Anastasia palette. And if you guys watched my video on it, then you probably know why I don't think it's worth the hype. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to do the eyeshadow palette collection tag. My friend Nessa did this the other day and I'll have her video linked down below, but I thought this was a fun little tag to do, so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do this video too. The first one is your oldest and your newest eyeshadow palettes. The oldest one that I have currently in my collection is this Kat Von D palette. Oh man, I don't even remember what this is called. The Spellbinding Eyeshadow Book. But this is my oldest palette. Oh man, she is old. I probably got this like when I was like 16, around there. And I'm 23 now, so yeah. This is my oldest. And then my current newest is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Norvina Collection Volume 4 palette. This is the newest one that I currently have. I'm still awaiting my cremated palette, but until I get that, this is my newest one that I have on hand. A funny thing, me and Nessa have the same most expensive palette, and that is the Pat McGrath palettes. Yee! So I have this one and this one. These are my most expensive palettes, but if we're talking like eyeshadow without like palettes, like pre-made palettes, I have probably every shade of the Makeup Geek eyeshadows, all in like 4 Z palettes, and all of those are really expensive. They're probably like 300 bucks to get all of those. So those are like probably my most expensive like collection of like eyeshadows, but as far as like individual palettes, Pat McGrath. And then my most affordable palette kind of shocked me because I thought I had a palette that was like around like $5, but I declutter palettes often if I don't really like them, but I do really like this palette. This is the e.l.f. XJ Kiss Up palette obviously from e.l.f., but this one was only $12 and it comes with a brush, and I actually really like this palette. It was a pretty good quality. It's got a mirror, sturdy, and it had just the right little mix of colors for me. And for my everyday palette, I could not pick that because I feel like my everyday palette changes all the time. So I did do a video on my favorite eyeshadow palettes, and if you want to check that video out, I'll have it linked down below and also in the cards for you guys. But just to name off a few, the Carly Bible palette, the Jackie Aina palette, the Anastasia Norvina Volume 4 palette at the moment, Conspiracy palette, Alien palette. All of those I use on like a daily basis that are like my favorite, like grab and go, and I can get a nice look going. And then I couldn't pick one palette that was my most colorful palette, so I have 2 for this one. First one is the Sephora Pro Pigment palette. This one I was obsessed with for the longest time. So I have this one. I haven't used this one in a while, and then like looking at it, I'm like, ooh, I really want to use this again. But yeah, this palette I freaking went bonkers over when I first got it. And then my next most colorful palette is the Jawbreaker palette, which has a little bit more pastel-y shades. The other one is a little bit more neon bright colors, and this one has a little bit more pastel in there. And then my smallest little palettes are, well, I guess they're palettes. They're by Kaja. They're they got little eyeshadows in here. I think there's only 3. Hold up. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so there's 3 little eyeshadows and a little mirror in here. They're pretty cute, but I got 2 shades of these, and these are my little tiny palettes. And then my biggest palette is the Morphe James Charles palette. This one is huge. Like, getting this thing out and laying it out for me to use, like, the shades to it is like reading a book. Like, what in the heck? This thing is huge. My palette with the best memories probably going to be the same as Nessa, is the Blue Bud palette. One, because this palette kind of made our bond stronger between me, Nessa, and Crystal. And then the other thing is that my boyfriend actually went to go get this for me while I was working, and the stories of him trying to get this was hilarious. So every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, telling your boyfriend to get an eyeshadow palette is the funniest thing ever. But yeah, the Blue Bud palette. So palettes that I think are worth the hype. I had to think about this for a while, but I definitely think the Carly Bible palette. I feel like this one was a little like, you know, it got hyped up and then it kind of like died down. Everyone's like, man, whatever. But I am so obsessed with this palette. Like, if you love like that soft glam, springtime, effortless, glamorous look to your eyes, you need this in your life. And then I also couldn't pick one for this one. So the Alien palette is also definitely one of my favorite ones. I love the shades in this palette. Definitely worth the hype. Something that is not worth the hype though is also an Anastasia palette. And if you guys watched my video on it, then you probably know why I don't think it's worth the hype. But it's the Anastasia Beverly Hills Amrezy palette. I don't know why that palette was just making me so angry. I'll have that video linked down below, but it was just making me so mad. I've never had a palette make me so mad until I got that palette. And so when it was like not worth the hype, I was like, definitely that palette. Favorite palette from my favorite brand, the Alien palette again. So I love Jeffree Star. I get all of his palettes, but Alien palette is probably my most used favorite. Definitely one of the first ones that I'd go and repurchase if, well, I guess you can't really repurchase it, but I have a backup of this one. So yeah, if something happens to this one, I have another one because I love it so much. And then this last one is your most used palette. Now this one was kind of hard for me because I was like, oh, maybe it's one of my favorite palettes. But then I like really got to looking and I have found my most used palette. It is the Lorac Pro palette. If you guys remember this one, I banged this one up. I hit pan on the white shade. A lot of the shades had some pretty good dents in them, but man, when this palette first came out, I thought this was like the best thing on the planet. So I don't know why I still have it. I maybe keep it for like sentimental reasons, but like definitely my most used palette. And then the other one is a Morphe palette, and this palette is pretty old too because I mean, look at Morphe's logo. This is before they like revamped everything. This is the 35B. It doesn't even have anything on the back. This is like when Morphe first started to get big. I want to say I was like maybe a junior or a sophomore in high school, but this one I freaking used to death. It's really hard to tell on camera, but this one I used a lot in like cosmetology school. I used it for Halloween makeup. I used it for everyday makeup. I used it for literally everything. Like this was my first like colorful palette, and me as a person that loves colorful eyeshadow and just giving your first colorful eyeshadow palette, oh man, this thing got shredded to death. But that is it for this little palette tag. And if you're wondering what palette I have on my eyes today, I have the Jeffree Star Thirsty palette. This palette I've been reaching for a little bit because, you know, it's like a summery, popsicle-y, it's got water drops on it. So I've been reaching for this palette a bit more often here since summer is upon us. Let me know if you could guess what my answers were for these questions, or if anything shocked you of what my answers were. But that is it for this video. If you guys haven't seen my last video, I did a whole quarantine beauty favorites. So all my favorites that I've been reaching for the last couple weeks, months in quarantine, that video will be right over here for you guys. This video will be suggested to you by YouTube, and my face will be right here. Click on it and subscribe to my channel.